Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Prog Report podcast interview. This is Roy. My guest on this episode is adamelk, founder and singer for the band The Mommyheads, an alternative prog rock band that's been around for a really long time. They've just over the last decade started to develop a prog audience. They have a new album out called Coney Island Kid. I talked to Adam about the band's long history, working with Don Was, getting signed to Geffen Records, their new album Coney Island Kid, and a whole lot more. So stick around for that. Before we get started, just a reminder, subscribe to our YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on progreport.com and on all our socials. And now my chat with adamelk.
What's up, dude?
Good to meet you. Finally, face to face.
I know.
How you been?
I'm pretty good.
So, you're done with the tour? You're back in New York, or?
So we did 10 shows in Sweden, which we love going to. We keep going back, and that was awesome. And then we have a Northeast tour. Everybody works in the band, so we got to kind of stay near home. And like if we do a West Coast thing, that will take up our 15 slots for the year. So we try to keep it under 20 shows.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because we're all adults now.
Right. So how did you end up that you have this following in Europe and in Sweden in particular that caused you to go back? Is that something that's been going on a long time?
It was really a fluke. We put out 4 or 5 records in the 90s, and we're very much a regional act for New York and San Francisco. So we were bi-coastal. We would tour between the two cities, but our best shows by far and best friends and connections were in the West Coast and the East Coast. And then we put out a Geffen record for a minute, and we were kind of the band of the week in 97. We toured with Lisa Loeb, you know how it is, and had a couple of A&R guys show interest, and then we got this big deal, and we were in Billboard on the cover, blah, blah, blah. And then when they realized what we were or what we weren't really Geffen material, they dropped us. But back in the day, before the internet really was a thing, boxes of CDs went to some weird places like Indonesia and South Korea and Sweden. And, you know, it was, as much as it was slow to ramp up a band, it was slow to ramp down a band. And so we never ramped down in Sweden, and they sort of had their own tastes and their own likes and dislikes, and were more of a fan of ours than some of the other things on the roster. So they kept listening to it there, the Geffen record, and 10 years after we'd broken up, we were getting calls from guys going, "Hey, come out, you know, it's going to be great." So we did, and that was 8 visits ago.
That's wild, right? It's amazing. That's such a cool thing.
It's bananas.
It's really cool. So, do you know an artist there's an artist that's a friend of mine that plays around the East Coast areas from Boston, Adam Ezra. Have you ever heard of this guy?
I know him well. We've collaborated on many things.
A few years ago, I saw him at a show, and he knew that I was into this whole prog rock scene and doing all this and everything I was doing. And he told me he's like, you'd like this band, the Mommyheads. I think this is a band you should check out.
I love that he dropped us, though. It's always word of mouth. It's always the best is word of mouth.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So I want to know a little bit more about the full history and let you talk a little bit about the full history of the band. Well, you have a new album out. By the time this airs, it's going to be out. Coney Island Kid. Is it your 20th record? Is that correct?
It's our 15th actual record of material. So I'm with a 10-year break, which is, if we hadn't done the 10-year break, we would have had maybe 20, but we needed it. So it's good to take a break.
Yeah. You're a songwriting machine. I mean, are you always writing? Is it just all the time?
I'm somewhat of a compulsive creator. I find that if I'm writing, I stay out of trouble. So it's plain and simple. If I'm not writing, I'm buying stuff off Amazon or binge watching Netflix or doing something stupid. So
right.
Life is very simple for me. If I strum a guitar and I write a song and it's decent, I feel pretty good. And it's like a hobby mixed with I'm going to be known by my songs years after I'm gone. And it's funny how the hobby is the thing you're probably known for, whereas the job that you work so hard on for years and years, you can't remember what you did last year in that job. So it's funny how things flip. And, you know, the thing you do while you're staring at the wall and got some time on the weekend is the thing that outlives you.
It's
And
great
that's
to
kind
have
of
it.
cool.
Great to have it to
Yeah,
do. That's
exactly.
good, you know.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the history of the band a little bit. How the band got started, and then the 10-year break, and then what drove you to have this sort of last, I don't know, decade resurgence, which I think has been pretty cool.
Yeah, so we started in high school. We were just like-minded sort of new wave kids and played CBGBs a hell of a lot and played all those weird little clubs in New York in the late 80s. New York was a weird place. It was very dark. Not a lot of street lamps worked. The smell of urine was ever pervasive, and it didn't feel like there were rules. It just felt like Gotham City from Batman, and the clubs were loose. They didn't worry about analytics. They just, if they liked you, they booked you. You know, it was all by, everything was by gut back then. And you didn't have to like look up people up and become a genius quickly so that, you know, like get the data download. Like you didn't need all that. You just, your gut told you what to do in the moment. And you listened and you absorbed it and you said, I like it, I don't like it, and you moved on. And that's what we came out of. And our instincts were to play together. And the drummer, the keyboardist, and I met in like 89 at CBGB's. I saw them play and I was blown away. And I had my own drummer and bass player, and we melded together. And it was awesome. Hilly Crystal was our mentor, the guy who owned CB's. And then New York got a little nuts, and so we moved to San Francisco, and we were really into the band at that point, and Little Feat and groove bands. We were also very Zappa oriented. I mean, Mommyheads is really mothers of invention and Talking Heads, so we were a
Oh,
heavy
I never known
early
that. Okay.
Zappa. But we loved Talking Heads, so we liked, you know, first four Talking Heads records where it was tight songs. We loved Zappa where it was crazy. You never knew what to expect, and we tried to meld the two, and with the harmonies and sort of you know, uplifting lyrical passages of XTC, and so that was our thing. And we played, toured, and eventually we played with everyone in the early '90s. Literally every band. That's just what happens. You're on the circuit. Everybody plays together. So, and eventually we played with Lisa Loeb. She asked us to open for her when she had her hit that was #1 everywhere, Stay.
Stay. Yeah.
And she was as big as possible she was Geffen's biggest signing, I think anyone's biggest signing. She was literally everywhere. And so we were playing amphitheaters and large clubs, and that blew us away. And it got us in front of Geffen, and then we did the record in LA with Don Was, who was in between Rolling Stones records, and Jim Scott, who was in between Wildflowers with Tom Petty and Rolling Stones and Bonnie Raitt. And then we were thrown into that and made our Geffen record, and then we broke up, and I got a real career, and everyone got real careers, and then our first drummer passed away from high school, Jan Kotek, in '07. We did a reunion show, and we were all 10 years wiser and older, and we're like, this feels good. And from that moment on, we've been relatively busy. There was another 5-year break where I just started business, but what we found out is life is not easy. It's hard to recreate yourself. Like if you're a musician and that comes easy to you, you strum a guitar, you play the drums, and it just flows out, and everything else is hard to do, paying bills, mortgages, mowing the lawn, whatever's, you know, then just as you get older, you're like, well, why am I not just doing the easy stuff? So we all looked at each other and said, well, let's just get together and do the stuff that just flows out, and let's stop, you know, even talking on emails was hard. Figuring out schedules was hard. Once we got in the room, it flowed, and we were like, let's just keep doing this. And that's really the beginning of our second phase, which we've produced 10 records. I forget, but
Yeah.
9 or 10 records in a short span. And a record a year is not that hard if you have a band of like brothers that we all just really dig each other's company, and we know how to play this kind of music. It just kind of flows. It's not a labor.
You would think that, but you know, there's a lot of bands. I think it's now more prevalent now these days where lots of bands are taking 3, 4, 5-year breaks. It happens all the time. It's really weird. Where I think '70s, '80s, you had bands that were putting out albums a lot, and then if you took a long break, then it was like, whoa, they disappeared for a while. I think now it seems to be common, but you guys are bucking that, which is pretty cool.
Well, there's things that I think people take themselves way too seriously, musicians. They think they're recreating the wheel every time they do a record. B, there are egos. I want the bass louder. I want before you know it, the mix isn't right. Let's keep revisiting it. Um, there's so many personal things that get in the way and philosophies. I want, no more gas powered this. And, I eat meat, I'm a vegetarian. There's so many different things. When you just play the music and it flows, record it. And don't worry if it speeds up and slows down. If it feels good, that should be everything. And that's what I learned from like Neil Young. He puts out records that, Bob Dylan in the 70s put out records every month and they felt right. Whether he was a Christian one moment or a Jew the next or a Muslim the next, he was music was part of his daily routine. It didn't feel like he had to put on the clothing of music like a bad tux.
Right.
Like it just was his daily thing. And it didn't feel like for those guys, and yes, and a lot of other bands that I adore, and John Denver put out a record every month. It felt like it wasn't pretentious, it wasn't overwrought, and take them or leave them. But this is what I got to say, and some people are buying it, so I'm just going to keep going. So it's not this like serious thing, and that's what we've learned. Don't take it too seriously, and don't let egos get in the way. Just make music.
Yeah, that works. And then you have this new prog rock kind of uh audience, I guess, that's jumped on over the last few years, it seems like. Um did you ever see your guys as a prog rock band? I mean, now that when you were talking about how you got the name and the Zappa and Talking Heads and all that, it's really started to make more sense to me. Um because people that like prog like those bands too. It's sort of maybe an intellectuality kind of thing with the songwriting. I think that maybe is what it is. It,
I feel like if you have three chords, you could be rock. Da na 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 na, right? Three
yeah,
chords. The only time I feel right is by your side. Then they modulate, so it's three chords modulated. So if you have four chords, you're still in the rock zone. Once you get to five chords, you could be progressive, right? Like because it's like it's like a mathematical equation. You get six chords in there and you throw a minor and a diminished, you're super progressive. So for me, progressive is just like you learn your instrument, you get bored of the three chords, and then your lyrics get a little more detailed. They're a little less about love every song. Maybe they're talking about, not just goblins and ghouls, but where the world's heading and topical things. Progressive music to me is a lot of music. I think Remain in Light is as progressive as any Marillion record. I think it's more progressive than a lot of current prog bands. My problem with prog is that when it gets too musician-y and too numbers and too like we're on Mount Olympus as musicians, come bow, come to the show and
well,
be in
that you're
awe of the
right.
spectacle of my
There's somewhere in the
fingers.
middle there that's like the perfect. Yeah,
Yeah, and it becomes like a magic show. Like the rabbit's here. No, it's not. And I get the magic show, but there's always this wall, like sort of between the magician has his tricks. You're never gonna know him, and I feel that way about super players. And then I miss the song. And what I love about early prog was they were Beatles fans, and
mm,
John Anderson was a huge Beatles fan. Peter Gabriel was and they wanted to do Everly Brothers, but twist it in a way that was they just wanted to make something fresh. And if that's the case, then it could be anything. There are no rules. There were no rules back then. I feel like there are more rules now. Like, are you this or are you that? And the musician thing really grates on my nerves. It's like when I'm talking to someone and they purposely use large words, collegiate words, to try to prove to me how intelligent they are. I'm like, dude, just talk to me like a human. And I feel like prog can become like that. Like, stop with the big words. You don't need them. Speak from your heart. And that's when I miss original prog, where it was fresh and raw and it hadn't been heard before. But really, prog for me can be some Stevie Wonder, where he goes, you know, too high, do do do, but didn't do. It's like it's jazz, it's Duke Ellington, it's funk. To me, it's progressive. So
yeah,
progressive to me is huge. And the thing about progressive music that I love is I love the people. They're open-minded. Sometimes when you talk to people in a dance crowd or trip hop or whatever, they're very like, I do this. progressive people pride themselves on being open, and that's something I love, and
Well,
that's why we embrace it, you know.
well, growing up, I was a fan of bands like ELO and Supertramp, and different bands like that did all this kind of stuff. And then I come to find now that we do the prog report, and there's this whole kind of prog scene that we've been in now for like a decade. I find out that people think of those bands as prog. It never occurred to me that they were prog bands, but I guess it's just it fit my mental state of the kind of stuff I liked or whatever, and it didn't matter that it had a million notes or not. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It is everything. It is a lot of stuff.
I think the best identity is when you're told what it is and you don't create it. And that's what happened to us. We went to Sweden, and all the people that loved us were prog fans.
Right.
One friend of ours, this guy Anders, who we stay with, is literally the premier prog writer of Sweden. And when Genesis wants to come to Sweden, they speed dial him. Same with Yes. I mean, he's always on the phone doing interviews with like Crimson, and he basically said, "Look, I'm pretty much an authority, at least for Sweden, and you're more prog than you realize. You should embrace it." And so being told what you are is better because you're getting sort of a perspective that you can't force by yourself. If you make up your own identity, it's always going to smell like rotten fish somehow, like something's rotting because you don't really believe it. You just want to be cool. But when you're told, then it's all that's out of the equation. And you're just like, I guess I trust you. You're an authority on it. You have 1,000 records in your collection. Let's go with this prog thing. And so we were told we were prog and that we should embrace it and we'd be healthier. It's like a doctor's appointment, right? Just you'll be healthier if you just walk a little more and eat this, right? So it was pretty awesome to go there and have that sort of perspective, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's great. And
Yeah,
then what's wrong with getting some more fans? People that like your music. I mean, that's great.
totally.
I thought Genius Killer was one of my favorite albums that you guys had put out. Was a couple of years ago now, I think. And then so you got the new album, Coney Island Kid. Let's talk about that album a little bit. Is that you? Are you the Coney Island Kid? Is that just the story of you guys, you and the band? Well, what is that about?
I more than usual, I kind of did a sort of deep dive into my own psyche and tried to remember what it was like growing up. And I think the cool thing about that is everyone has some intense memories, whether they're positive or negative, about where they grew up. Every teenager wants to run away. Either they're successful and then they have kids and they come back because they're like, you know what, home is where the heart is, whatever. You always have intense feelings for where you came from. And I grew up in Coney Island, and my feelings were very intense. I realized more and more, and by diving into this, it was very healthy for me. It was like therapy, really, pure therapy to realize that a lot of my patterns in life were sculpted so early, and a lot of what triggers me was sculpted so early. Those triggers started when I was really a little kid, and how I view life and everything. There's an urban amusement park down the block, and the way they hawk their wares, come right, step right up. I do that in my life. That's what I do for my job. Like I'm literally a product of my environment, and either I'm embarrassed by it or I embrace it, like everybody on the planet. And I ran from it, and now I'm close to it. My dad won't leave the area, and each song is a different side. Soul's Aquarium is about the aquarium, which is on the beach with a view of the water with fish behind glass looking at the water. I always wondered about that. Solemn by the Sea is a twist on Sodom by the Sea. I think Freud went there and said, this is Sodom by the Sea, because it was so debaucherous to see people in first bathing suit bikinis in the 30s, and all the people putting money in things and looking at the freaks and the freak shows. And so I called it Solemn by the Sea, like sadness, like constantly diving in and finding twists. And that song is all about the early amusement parks. The first 3 amusement parks was Steeplechase and what were they? I'm forgetting, but Dreamland. Dreamland burnt down. I think it was an insurance scheme, but they had like a ride that went through hell and one that went through heaven and one that replicated a volcano erupting. and it was really blew people's minds. And you put a dime in and you disappeared into this, and it burnt down. And there were lyrics about animals running through the streets. So it was a real wonderful experience lyrically, and then we started putting the songs together with sound effects, and it became a concept record. God forbid, those I
Well, my
run
God,
from
that's
concept
ding, ding, ding,
records.
Prog right there, you know.
I mean, what a problem! So many bad concept records, and there could only be one or two, Quadrophenia and Tommy and Lamb, but you got to give it a shot. So yeah, it was fun, very intense.
That is pretty cool. You also did a video for Why Aren't You Smiling? Kind of a quirky video, very funny. Um, Talk about the idea to make that video and put that out as the first single. How did you decide that's the single from the record, first of all?
I think because it's the most immediate, easiest song to get. And I don't believe in singles. I think it's a nice teaser. It's like an aperitif, but um, the video was very instant for me. It's a song, society says you should smile more. You'll get jobs. You'll get a husband. You'll get a wife. Just smile more on the date. Smile more on your Tinder profile. Smile more to your cab driver. Smile more Thanksgiving dinner. So it was a song about like we should be smiling as our dreams are crushed. We should be smiling as our faces are being changed in Photoshop. Just smile. So
That's so
it's a
funny.
song about questioning that. And then what I wanted in the video was slow motion camera. There are these cameras that you got to pay $50,000 to $100,000 for these cameras, and they do like 1,000 frames per second. So I rented one for a day, and we just filmed ourselves smiling as like stuff hits us, and you get the slow motion like like those micro like responses in the face. It was so much fun to throw meat at each other and Rice Krispies
Yeah, it's wild.
and like, why aren't you smiling? So, and then we went in the rage room and beat the hell out of office supplies, and that was fun too. So,
That's great.
yeah.
You mentioned something earlier, which I didn't know about. I want to follow up on it with you because I'm curious. You said you got to work with Don Was for your album when you were with Geffen. What was that experience like working with him? Because actually, he sounds, thinking about it now, like the perfect choice to produce your record. But did it work out like that?
He was very involved in the basic tracks, very involved in the like choosing which songs he thought were deemed worthy. He wanted printouts of the lyrics. He got very involved with pre-production. He sat in the practice space. Um, and it was great. He was a buffer between us and the label. If the label were asking for stupid things, he'd go, "Don't worry about it." He got Tower of Power to come down and play. He put us up in his house in Mulholland Drive, which was a house where they shot like soft porn movies in the 70s. It was Russ Meyer's house with a pool with glass so you can look under and see, like more than you thought you could see. And it was like with a view of LA. So there was all this like amazing stuff. The part that we didn't love is once we started mixing and doing overdubs, he kind of disappeared. And he was back with the Stones in pre-production and Bonnie Raitt. And he was so overbooked that we couldn't find him. And so that's when Jim Scott, who did all the Wilco records, and Tom Petty, and who's a ringer, kind of took over. And I thought Don would be around more with some tricks and, let's do tape loops, whatever. He was very organic. It was a very organic record. It's like guys in a room playing. The problem is it came out the same day as Radiohead, OK Computer, Beck Odelay, like all these loopy, twisted, almost like bringing prog back after 10 years of being dormant albums. And here we were making a record that sounded like the first band record or Little Feat, and we were way out of like our league. And people would hear OK Computer and go, "That's genius," and listen to our record and go, "It sounds like they just tracked themselves. Where's the magic?" So that was a problem.
Yeah.
But he was amazing in some respects. I mean, he literally oozes confidence and producer dumb or whatever. He lives in a producer world. Like he is the ultimate calms the room, and he's a therapist. Like most artists are insane, so they're in the room losing their minds, and he comes in and he levels it. I mean, to get Mick Jagger and Keith Richards to make a record was not easy in the 90s. So he could do it.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
I literally, the moment we put out a record, he was being honored in Billboard for his birthday, and it was everyone was had ads. I mean, he was like the biggest thing ever.
He
So
was. I remember that name back in there around that period. I mean, you couldn't think of a bigger producer at the time. I actually don't hear his name anymore, really, come to think of it. I'm sure he's doing something. But that was a period where he was everywhere, for sure.
we got a peek into like music industry LA like nobody's business. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a obviously you have the whole experience. You have the whining and dining and the getting signed and then the big producer thing and then the getting dropped experience. It's the full circle like being a being a musician experience. But I mean, do you look back on it and go, "Hey, at least I got to experience that. It was cool," or it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be?
I wouldn't trade any of it. I loved every moment. I didn't like getting dropped. I didn't like the band breaking up because your whole world's wrapped up in it. I was
Yeah.
27, 28, and everybody thinks they're gonna do, play huge stadiums at some point because you don't even know what you want, and you're just in a herd of other 20-year-olds, and they're all going somewhere, so you just follow. And we were friends with Cake, and they would have No Doubt at their show, and we were opening, and you're just hanging out with all these star-studded people, and going to Matthew Sweet's party, and there's Amy Mann and Michael Penn, and you're just like, I'm one of these people. Why can't I be one of them? I'm
Wow.
part of the pop royalty, and then you get dropped, and all of a sudden the phone doesn't ring anymore, and you're like, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I should just get a day job, and it was all just a dream. And that's actually fine too. That's humbling, and that's life, and you learn from that. And I don't think we'd make any of our current records without that sort of huge fall from the big LA thing. Um, and I'm really proud of making 15 records, and I'm proud of what we do. And I think a lot of it's done in the shadows and not under the scrutiny of Rolling Stone and Pitchfork and all that. Like it's just we just do it and put it out. And I think it's very freeing. And I don't mind the current situation where there's no labels and it's all just random stuff that just comes in. It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah. It's a whole different wild
So
time
different.
now. It's crazy, right? I mean, do you look at the whole Spotify and streaming and all that? Do you have a positive or negative view of all of that, or you're cool with it?
If you're functional and you make stuff and you can get it out there, you don't have to like pander to some A&R guy and play like shows just for them. We used to rent SIR in the city for like just a show for RCA, right? And we spent so much time in this little micro world of like pandering to like experts. And now you could just put something out. The problem is I think musicians aren't meant to be publicity people, and they're not meant to send emails going, "Hey, check my music out." I think the really good musicians should just make music. If they have a gift, just make it. The problem is they're trying to be everything. They're trying to manage. They're trying to be booking agents. And I think too much time is spent taking pictures of what you ate for breakfast as a band member and posting to Instagram. Just do what you're supposed to do. 30 years from now, no one's
But
going to
that's
know
the
about
tough
that
thing. But
food.
that's the tough thing is that that's how you promote yourself now. It's part of it. So
That's a
and you're
problem.
100% right. A lot of musicians just don't know that part. They're not worried about it. And to many respects, maybe you're right. They shouldn't be. But that's part of the world that it is now, I think, right? It's weird.
That's my least favorite part.
Yeah.
And I'm still not on Instagram. I need to be, but it's the least personable human connection part. It's just look at me. I prefer a live show. You have a beer before. People come up to the merch table. They're like, dude, that was awesome. You have a beer with them after. What are you doing? Let's hang out. Tell me your influences. I'll tell you mine. I like that stuff. I like doing interviews like this or radio interviews or talking to DJs or some DJs ask me to do shows. I'll just string together an hour of music. And, that's the interactive stuff that I like. I think the ultimate's a live show, obviously, but acoustic things. We do record stores. I love record store shows. It's the record buying public. Like they have thousands of records. There are people. Um, any kind of interaction like that's perfect. I don't like the one-sided. I don't care about what just happened to you. Here's my smoothie. That's the part I don't like. and look at my band and check my video out. So I do it, but I know that it really does not have a lot of value unless there's a connection.
You're not wrong there, man. It's just sort of the weird position everybody's in nowadays. I deal with working on social media basically from part of my job, all day, and I wish I didn't have to do it either.
Well, there's a
You know what I
difference
mean?
because
It's one of those
you
things.
that's your job. But when
Yeah.
I have a problem when someone's doing it for themselves. And that's the same thing that goes back to when someone tells you you're Prog, or they tell you, hey, I think you're this. This is an outward thing. This is like, I'm telling you that I'm good.
Yeah.
And I'm in the band and I'm in this body. And you got to just trust my perspective that I'm good. That's when I have an issue. That's when it's hard to trust. You are working with other people and you have the perspective and you're like, I dig this. Check it out. Like, I'm a connoisseur to some degree. I get a lot of stuff.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
different to me. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, so it's a good that in that respect. It's how you get to people, let them know. So, but anyway, let's to recap all of this. I love talking about all this stuff like this. It's really interesting to me.
Of course.
But Coney Island Kid by the Mommyheads is out now. Look them up on I guess Facebook and Spotify and are you
Bandcamp.
and
Yeah.
wherever
Patreon.
else?
Patreon's amazing.
Okay, you guys have a Patreon? That's cool. Great.
Yeah, we do $1 a month and you get a song and you get an update and we try to make it worth $1.
That's awesome. You can't beat $1. Support these guys. They're great. They've been around for a long time and they're still kicking ass, making great music, becoming more proggy by the day. And good to talk to you, man. Good to finally see you. And we'll be in touch again really soon.
Loved it. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on all our socials and on progreport.com for all your news, interviews, reviews, and more. And we'll see you again real soon.